They say you don't really know someone until you catch them lying, but I wasn't prepared for just how deep Emma's lie went. I had been sitting in my car for what felt like an eternity, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were turning white. Across the street, the soft glow of the hotel sign flickered. It was the kind of place you'd drive past without giving a second glance, but tonight, it was the center of my universe. She was inside, my wife of 12 years, and I was about to find out the truth. I'll admit, I wasn't even sure why I came. Maybe I didn't want to believe the signs that had been slapping me in the face for weeks. The late nights, the sudden work dinners, the phone glued to her hand always facing down. There had been a knot in my gut for a while, telling me something was wrong, but I'd shoved it aside. Trust your wife, I kept telling myself. She's just stressed, she'd never do that. But when she said she was going to another late meeting and I saw the notification from our shared app, a notification that told me she was at a hotel, not some restaurant, I snapped. That's how I ended up here, parked like an idiot, watching people go in and out of the lobby, waiting. I don't even know what for. Confirmation? Maybe. Or maybe just to prove to myself that I was overreacting, that my imagination was running wild. Then, I saw her. Emma stepped out, laughing, and it wasn't with her co-workers. No, this was someone else. Some guy. Tall, younger than me, maybe mid-30s. I watched as he casually placed his hand on the small of her back like he'd done it 100 times before, guiding her out the door. My heart stopped for a second, and I swear I forgot how to breathe. I wasn't ready for that. Not for the way she leaned into him, not for the smile on her face, the kind of smile I hadn't seen in months. In that moment, the whole world just froze. Everything I thought I knew about my marriage shattered right there in front of me. I could have stormed out of the car, made a scene, demanded answers. But I didn't. I just sat there, watching her get into his car, watching them drive off, completely oblivious to the fact that her husband was just a few feet away, crumbling inside. I don't know how long I stayed in that car afterward, staring at the empty spot where they'd been. I kept asking myself the same question over and over: how long had this been going on? And that's when it hit me. I had to know. Not just a suspicion, not just a feeling. I needed to know every single detail. And once I had that, once I had proof, well, then I'd decide what to do next. But I knew one thing for sure: this wasn't going to end well. For her or for him. I spent the next 2 days in a fog, walking through life like a ghost. Emma had no idea. She carried on like normal, smiling, texting on her phone, coming home late with a half-hearted excuse about work. Every time I looked at her, I felt this surge of anger, but I kept it in check. I knew I couldn't just confront her without proof. If I flew off the handle and accused her without something solid, she'd flip it on me, make me out to be the crazy one. I needed to be sure. I needed to know the full extent of the betrayal. I started by looking at her phone whenever she wasn't around. She'd gotten careless, leaving it on the kitchen counter or nightstand while she was in the shower. The first few times I tried, the damn thing was locked. But it didn't take me long to figure out her passcode. It was our anniversary, of all things, April 12th. That hurt more than I expected. She was cheating on me, but still used our special date to guard her secrets. Once I was in, it didn't take long to find what I was looking for. Her messages were clean, of course. She wasn't stupid enough to leave a trail there. But I dug deeper, checking her email and then her hidden apps. That's when I found it. A messaging app we didn't normally use. It was buried in a folder she had titled Utilities, like she was trying to hide it in plain sight. And there it was, a string of messages with someone named Ryan. I felt sick just reading through them. There were no I love yous, but the intimacy was undeniable. They'd been meeting up for weeks. She'd send him pictures, selfies from the car, one of her in that little black dress I always liked, and then the more risque ones that made my stomach churn. They had pet names for each other, inside jokes. The kind of crap that makes you want to vomit. What killed me the most wasn't even the dirty texts. It was the mundane stuff, the way she'd tell him about her day, complain about work, share little frustrations about her life. That was our thing. That's what we used to do together at the end of a long day. And now she was doing it with him, this guy, this Ryan. It took everything I had not to smash the phone right then and there. But I couldn't afford to lose my cool. I took screenshots of everything and sent them to myself, deleting the sent messages as soon as I did. I made sure there wasn't a trace left behind. Then I locked the phone again and slid it back onto the nightstand like nothing had happened. I sat on the edge of the bed, the weight of what I'd found sinking in. It wasn't just a fling. It wasn't just some stupid mistake she'd made one night. This had been going on for weeks, maybe longer. And she didn't even feel guilty. If she did, she sure as hell didn't show it. The way she smiled when she saw his texts, the way she got dressed up for him, it was like she was living a double life right under my nose. I had the proof now. I could confront her, throw the messages in her face, and demand answers. But I wasn't ready yet. I needed more. I wanted to catch her in the act. I needed to see it with my own eyes. The next few days were unbearable. Every time she left the house, I wondered if she was heading to meet him. Every time she smiled at her phone, I knew it wasn't me she was thinking about. I'd lie in bed next to her at night, staring at the ceiling, listening to her breathing, trying to figure out when everything had gone so wrong. I couldn't sleep. The anger gnawed at me, keeping me awake. I replayed our conversations, our arguments, looking for the moment I had missed, the moment she had decided to betray me. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to track her. We had one of those family tracking apps on our phones, the kind we used to use when we'd misplace our phones or when we needed to find each other in a crowd. It was innocent enough, and she wouldn't think twice about it. I logged in and watched. She wasn't stupid. She didn't go straight to him. There were detours, stops at the store, visits to a friend's house. But after a while, the pattern became clear. Tuesday and Thursday nights were hers. She'd leave around 7 p.m., saying she had a late meeting or some event for work, and she wouldn't come home until after 10. And every time, her location would ping somewhere near the same hotel where I had seen her before. The hotel wasn't fancy. It was one of those mid-range places, tucked away in a quiet corner of downtown. It had a small parking lot, just big enough for a handful of cars. I started driving by there on those nights, parking a few streets down and watching from a distance. I'd see her car parked out front, and I'd just sit there, the anger building inside me, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight they hurt. I thought about confronting her right then and there. Every fiber of my being wanted to storm into that hotel, catch them in the act, and end this whole charade. But I knew that if I did, it wouldn't go the way I wanted. She'd make excuses, twist the situation, maybe even try to turn it around on me. I needed undeniable proof. So, I waited. I followed her, watched her routine, and took notes. Thursday night came, and she left again. This time, I was ready. I followed her to the hotel, parking in my usual spot down the street. I waited for about 20 minutes, watching her car from a distance, then got out and walked toward the building. I didn't go inside. I wasn't that bold yet. Instead, I positioned myself across the street, hidden behind a row of parked cars, where I had a clear view of the entrance. I stood there for what felt like hours, my heart pounding in my chest, my mind racing with all the things I wanted to say to her, to him. Then I saw them. She walked out first, looking as calm as ever, her hair tousled like she'd just been having a casual dinner or something. And there he was, right behind her, this Ryan asshole, standing way too close, laughing at something she said. I clenched my fists, trying to keep my cool. I wanted to rip him apart, but I knew this wasn't the time. Not yet. They walked to her car together, talking like nothing was wrong, like this was just another regular night for them. He leaned in, kissed her on the cheek, and I felt my stomach turn. It was real. It was happening, right in front of me. My wife was cheating on me, and here I was, standing in the shadows, watching it unfold. I stayed there, frozen, until they both got into their cars and drove off in opposite directions. My mind was spinning, trying to make sense of what I had just seen. I wanted to scream, to punch something, to do anything to release the anger that was boiling inside me. Instead, I just walked back to my car, got in, and drove home. When Emma came home that night, she was all smiles. She kissed me on the cheek like everything was normal, like she hadn't just spent the last few hours with another man. I played along, smiling back, asking her how her work dinner went. She gave me the usual vague details, making up some bullshit about clients and long meetings. I nodded, pretending to believe her, but inside, I was already planning my next move. The gloves were off now. I had seen enough. It was time for a confrontation. I had always thought about how I'd handle a situation like this if it ever came up. If Emma ever cheated, I assumed I'd go nuclear, yelling, slamming doors, and throwing things. But when the moment finally arrived, it wasn't like that at all. It was colder. Calmer. Almost clinical. I spent the entire next day in a strange state of focus, like a machine that had only one purpose, to make her confess. I already had the evidence. I had the screenshots of the messages with Ryan, I had the timestamps from the tracking app, and, worst of all, I had seen them together with my own eyes. Now, it was just a matter of getting her to say it, out loud, so there could be no twisting or denying. I wanted to wait until she came home that night. I figured it would feel more natural and ambush as she stepped through the door, blindsided. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized there was no way I could stomach another evening of pretending everything was fine. Not after what I'd seen. So I made the decision to confront her as soon as she got home from work that day, while the daylight still seeped through the windows, keeping everything stark and inescapable. When she walked in, carrying that same confident smile she'd worn every day for the past few weeks, I felt something snap. I had spent the entire day imagining what she'd say, how she'd try to weasel her way out of it, but seeing her in front of me made the reality so much worse. She dropped her bag on the counter, kicked off her shoes like she always did, and looked at me, completely unaware of what was about to happen. "Hey babe," she said, glancing at her phone as she walked toward the kitchen. "You won't believe the day I've had." She didn't even finish the sentence before I cut her off. "Emma, sit down." My tone was flat, hard. Her eyes flicked to mine, and for a second, I saw the flicker of confusion. She wasn't used to this version of me, the one that wasn't interested in casual chit-chat or hearing about her day. But she shrugged it off, probably thinking I had some work problem or something. She grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge and sat down at the kitchen table. "What's up?" she asked, casually twisting the cap off her bottle, taking a sip. I stayed standing. I couldn't sit. I didn't want to be on her level. I needed to keep that distance, to hold on to the edge that was keeping me from exploding. "I know about Ryan," I said, my voice steady. "I know everything." There was a split second, just a blink, where her face changed. That mask of calm, of control, cracked. It was so quick, I almost missed it. But I didn't. I saw it. That little flash of panic, the moment her brain was trying to catch up with what I just said. And then, just as quickly, she snapped back into herself, her expression hardening into something cold, defensive. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice a little too smooth. I wasn't playing her games. I wasn't about to let her drag this out. "Don't lie to me, Emma. I've seen the messages. I know about the hotel. I saw you with him." I was spitting the words out like they were poison, my fists clenched so tight I could feel my nails digging into my palms. "So don't sit there and pretend you don't know what I'm talking about." Her hand twitched on the bottle, but she didn't drop it. She sat there for a long moment, just staring at me. I could see her weighing her options, trying to decide which approach would save her the most. I wasn't sure what I expected her to say, maybe some tearful apology, or maybe even anger, blaming me for everything, but when she finally opened her mouth, her voice was calm. Detached. "It's not what you think." I let out a short, bitter laugh. "It's not what I think. You've been sneaking off to hotels with another guy for weeks, Emma. What exactly am I supposed to think?" She didn't respond right away. She just sat there, still as a statue, and I could see the gears turning in her head. I could practically hear her calculating, trying to figure out how to minimize the damage. When she finally spoke, her voice was so quiet I almost didn't hear her. It's not serious. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Not serious? Are you fucking kidding me? She looked up at me, her eyes cold. It's not serious. It was never supposed to be anything more than, I don't know, a distraction. It was just something I did to feel better. It wasn't supposed to get this far. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. A distraction? That's what this was to you? A fucking distraction? Her face twisted, like she was the one who was angry. What do you want me to say? You've been so wrapped up in your own shit for months. I needed something. Someone who actually paid attention to me. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She was actually trying to make it my fault. Like I had somehow driven her to this. Don't even try to pin this on me. You're the one who decided to sneak around, who decided to betray me. That's on you, Emma. Not me. She stood up then, shoving her chair back, her eyes flashing with anger. Betray you? Really? Do you even hear yourself? You've barely been here. You've been more married to your damn job than to me for months. What the hell did you expect me to do? Sit around and wait for you to decide to care again? The audacity of it stunned me into silence for a second. How could she turn this on me? How could she act like she was the victim here? I've always been here, Emma. Always. And if you were unhappy, if you needed more, you could have fucking told me. Instead, you go behind my back, you lie to me, and you expect me to believe this was all just some distraction? She didn't answer. She just stood there, staring at me, her chest rising and falling with deep breaths. For a moment, it felt like we were both on the verge of something, of breaking, of exploding, of saying things we could never take back. And then she did. I didn't plan for it to go this far, she said, her voice lower now, almost like she was pleading. I didn't. It just happened. It just happened? I repeated, my voice barely holding together. You don't just accidentally fall into bed with someone, Emma. She bit her lip, her eyes flicking away from mine. I didn't mean to hurt you. Too late for that. We stood there in silence, the tension thick enough to choke on. I could feel my hands shaking, my heart racing. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to say. This wasn't how I thought it would go. I had imagined screaming, breaking things, demanding she leave, but now that I was here, in this moment, all I felt was this cold, sinking pit in my stomach. I'm sorry, she said, but it didn't sound like an apology. It sounded like something she said because she felt she had to, not because she meant it. I shook my head. No, you're not. If you were sorry, you wouldn't have done it in the first place. Her jaw clenched, and for a moment, I thought she was going to argue, but then she just sighed, her shoulders sagging like she was tired of fighting. I didn't mean for any of this to happen, she said again, softer this time. I didn't want it to go this far. But it had. There was no taking it back. No pretending it hadn't happened. I couldn't unsee what I had seen. I couldn't undo the damage that had been done. I took a step back, needing to put more distance between us. How long? She blinked, confused. What? How long has this been going on? She hesitated for just a second too long, and that hesitation told me everything I needed to know. 3 months, she finally said. 3 months. 90 days. Weeks of lying, sneaking, and fucking around behind my back while I had been sitting at home like an idiot, thinking everything was fine. I nodded, letting the numbers sink in. 3 months, I repeated. And you didn't think, even once, to stop? To come to me and talk to me like an adult? You just kept going? She didn't say anything. She just stood there, biting her lip, her eyes fixed on the floor. Right, I said, my voice flat. Of course. I turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving her standing there in the cold silence of her own making. The next morning, I woke up before she did. Emma was still asleep, lying there like everything was fine, like she hadn't just admitted to 3 months of betrayal. I watched her for a moment, trying to wrap my head around how someone could lie like that, how she could lay next to me night after night, knowing what she was doing, and still have the nerve to act like nothing was wrong. There wasn't a trace of guilt on her face. She looked peaceful, content, as if she hadn't just destroyed everything. I quietly got up, careful not to wake her, and went downstairs. I wasn't hungry, but I made myself a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table, staring at my phone. I scrolled through the screenshots I'd taken of her messages with Ryan, reading over them again and again. The way they flirted, the little jokes they shared, the fucking pictures. It was like being stabbed every time I read them, but I couldn't stop. I needed to keep the pain fresh. I needed to keep my anger alive. I had spent the night thinking about what I was going to do. Divorce was an obvious option, but it felt too easy. Too clean. Emma had been playing me for months, sneaking around behind my back, and if I just filed for divorce and walked away, it would be like letting her off the hook. No, I wanted her to feel the weight of what she'd done. I wanted her to feel the same gut-wrenching betrayal I had felt when I saw her with him outside that hotel. The first thing I did was transfer some money. Not all of it, just enough to make sure I had control of most of the savings. Emma wasn't stupid, but I knew she wouldn't think about the bank accounts right away. That wasn't where her head was. She'd be too busy trying to figure out how to fix things, how to spin this in a way that made her look less guilty. She wouldn't be thinking about the money. So, I moved it to a separate account in my name and left enough behind so she wouldn't notice right away. I didn't need her getting suspicious. Next, I texted my lawyer. Not just any lawyer, the most cutthroat divorce attorney I could find. I had researched them the night before while Emma was sleeping, and one name kept coming up, Linda Schultz. She was known for taking spouses to the cleaners, especially in cases like mine where there was proof of infidelity. I told her everything in my message, attaching the screenshots of Emma's messages with Ryan. It wasn't long before I got a reply, "Let's talk today. I'll call you at noon." Perfect. Emma came downstairs around 8:30, yawning like it was just another Saturday morning. She gave me this half smile and reached for a mug, filling it with coffee before sitting across from me at the table. I watched her carefully, trying to read her face. Was she going to bring up last night? Was she going to apologize, or was she just going to pretend it never happened? For a few minutes, we just sat there in silence, the sound of the coffee maker the only thing breaking the tension in the room. Finally, she spoke. "Are we going to talk about this?" I didn't look at her. I took a sip of my coffee, staring at the table. "Talk about what?" "Come on," she sighed, setting her mug down. "You know what I mean. Last night." I stayed quiet for a moment, letting her squirm. She hated being uncomfortable, hated not being in control of the conversation, and I wanted her to feel that tension. "I don't know what there is to talk about, Emma," I finally said, setting my cup down with more force than I intended. "You've been cheating on me for 3 months. You admitted it. What's left to say?" She flinched at the word cheating, and for a second, I thought maybe she was going to break down, start crying or something. But she didn't. She just stared at me, her eyes hard, her lips pressed into a thin line. It wasn't like that," she said softly. "Really?" I snapped, finally looking at her. "Because it sure as hell seemed like that when I saw you two outside the hotel." Her eyes widened. She hadn't realized I'd seen them. She opened her mouth to say something, then closed it again, like she was struggling to find the right words. For a second, she looked genuinely panicked. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. "Yeah, I saw you, Emma. I saw you with him. So don't sit here and tell me it wasn't like that. You've been lying to me for months." She closed her eyes, rubbing her temples like she had a headache. "I didn't mean for it to happen, okay? It just got out of hand." I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Got out of hand? You've been sneaking around with this guy for 3 months, and that's your excuse? It got out of hand?" She opened her eyes again, and I could see the frustration building. "I told you last night, I was lonely. You've been so distant, and I..." "Oh, don't you fucking dare put this on me," I snapped, standing up so fast my chair nearly tipped over. You're the one who cheated. You're the one who lied. Don't sit there and act like this is my fault because I had a few late nights at work. If you were unhappy, you could have told me. You didn't have to go and fuck someone else. She flinched again at the word, and for a second, I thought I saw her eyes well up with tears. But she blinked them away and shook her head, like she was trying to regain control of the conversation. I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry, she said, her voice softer now, almost pleading. I made a mistake. I know that. But we can fix this. We can go to counseling, we can. I laughed again, shaking my head. Fix this? You think we can fix this? You think sitting down with a therapist is going to erase the fact that you've been screwing some guy behind my back for months? She didn't answer. She just sat there, staring at me with this desperate look on her face, like she was trying to will me to believe her. To forgive her. But there was nothing left to forgive. The damage was done. I can't do this, I said, shaking my head. I can't be with you. Not after this. She looked like I'd slapped her. What are you saying? I'm saying it's over, Emma. I'm done. For a moment, she didn't move. She just stared at me, her mouth slightly open, like she couldn't comprehend what I was saying. Then, slowly, she stood up, pushing her chair back as she did. You don't mean that, she said, her voice shaking. We've been together for 12 years. You don't just throw that away. I clenched my jaw, trying to keep my anger in check. You threw it away the moment you started fucking him. That did it. The mask cracked. She started crying loud, ugly sobs that made her shoulders shake. It was the kind of crying that might have made me feel something, once. But now? Now it just felt empty. I'm sorry, she sobbed, covering her face with her hands. Please, I'm so sorry. I didn't want to hurt you. I love you. I shook my head. You don't love me. Not anymore. She dropped her hands, staring at me with tear-streaked cheeks, shaking her head. That's not true. I do love you. I just made a mistake. Please, we can work through this. I'll do whatever it takes. I wanted to feel bad for her. I wanted to feel something. But all I felt was numb. No, Emma, I said, my voice cold. I'm done. I'm talking to a lawyer today. Her face went pale. A lawyer? I nodded. Yeah. I'm done with this. I'm done with you. She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like she was trying to say something but couldn't find the words. Then, without warning, she turned and ran out of the kitchen, her sobs echoing through the house. I stood there for a moment, listening to the sound of her crying upstairs, and felt nothing. No sympathy. No guilt. Nothing. Just a cold, hard emptiness where the love I used to feel for her had been. At noon, my phone rang. It was Linda Schultz, the lawyer. We went over the details, and I sent her everything, screenshots, dates, locations, everything. She told me she'd take care of it and that she'd be sending over the initial paperwork for me to sign by the end of the day. I didn't waste any time. After I got off the phone with her, I went upstairs. Emma was in the bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed, her face red and swollen from crying. She looked up at me as I walked in, her eyes full of that same desperation. Please, she whispered, her voice hoarse. Please don't do this. We can fix it. I ignored her. I went straight to the closet and started pulling out my clothes, tossing them into a suitcase. What are you doing? She asked, her voice rising in panic. What are you doing? I'm leaving, I said simply, not bothering to look at her. She stood up, rushing toward me, grabbing my arm. Please, don't do this. Don't go. I shook her off. It's over, Emma. She started crying again, louder this time, but I didn't care. I zipped up my suitcase and walked out, leaving her sobbing in the bedroom. I didn't know where I was going yet, but I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't coming back. Leaving Emma in the house, crying like she was the victim, was satisfying in a way I hadn't expected. But as I threw my bags in the trunk and pulled out of the driveway, the satisfaction started to fade. The anger I thought would die down by now didn't go away. It just shifted focus. It wasn't enough to end things with her. That part was done, and honestly, I didn't care about Emma anymore. She'd chosen her path, and I was ready to move on. But Ryan, was still out there, living his life like nothing had happened. He was the one who took what wasn't his. The one who'd inserted himself into my marriage, thinking he could just waltz in and sleep with my wife while I was none the wiser. And that? That was something I couldn't let slide. I didn't know much about him yet. Just his name, from the messages I had dug up, and a few pictures Emma had sent him. He wasn't anything special. Mid-30s, average-looking, but with that cocky smile that said he thought he was God's gift to women. It didn't matter. I wasn't interested in who he was as a person. I just needed to know how to hurt him, how to make him feel even a fraction of what I was feeling. The first step was figuring out where he worked. I knew from Emma's texts that they had met through some business event, some kind of networking function she'd attended a few months back. From there, it wasn't hard to track him down. A quick search on LinkedIn, a cross-check with his name from her messages, and there he was, Ryan Kendall, business development manager at a marketing firm downtown. It was almost too easy. People really don't know how much of their lives they throw online. With that out of the way, I started to map out my plan. It wasn't enough to just expose him as the asshole who ruined my marriage. I wanted to take everything he had. I wanted him to feel like his life was falling apart, just like mine had. If there was one thing I'd learned from watching enough divorces and cheating scandals in the news, it was that public humiliation ruins people. It doesn't matter how much money or status you have, when your dirty laundry gets aired out in front of everyone, people treat you like garbage. And Ryan? He had a reputation to protect. His whole image was built around being this slick, up-and-coming professional. The kind of guy who was always networking, always closing deals, always looking for the next big opportunity. So I decided to give him exactly that, an opportunity to ruin himself. The first part of the plan was simple: surveillance. I knew the hotel where he and Emma met regularly, and I knew his work schedule from the LinkedIn posts he made bragging about his latest projects. He was the kind of guy who lived for his job, always posting updates about his hustle and grind. It made him predictable. I parked near the hotel on a Thursday, just like the last time, and waited. Sure enough, around 7:15 p.m., Ryan showed up, looking every bit the douchebag I had imagined: button-down shirt, expensive watch, and that same smug smile as he sauntered into the lobby. I didn't need to follow him any further. I already knew what he was up to. The second part of the plan was a little more involved. I wanted to hit him where it hurt professionally. I spent the next few days digging deeper into his online presence, looking for anything I could use. It wasn't long before I struck gold. Ryan had a side gig as a freelance consultant, offering his services to smaller businesses looking to scale up their operations. He had a website, a few reviews, and best of all, his client list was right there on display for anyone to see. He even had a few testimonials up from previous clients, gushing about how great he was at finding solutions and navigating the competitive landscape. I made a list of his clients and started contacting them anonymously, pretending to be an unhappy customer. I told them I had hired Ryan for a project, but he had been unprofessional, missing deadlines, and making inappropriate comments to female employees. I suggested they look into his behavior more closely, hinting that there were rumors about his conduct in other workplaces. It didn't take long for the whispers to start spreading. I also emailed his boss at the marketing firm, using a burner email account. I kept it vague but damaging enough to make them suspicious. I suggested that Ryan was using company resources to manage his freelance work, and that he'd been seen leaving compromising meetings at the hotel with clients. I knew it was only a matter of time before they'd start watching him more closely, waiting for him to slip up. But I wasn't done yet. The final part of my plan involved Emma. I didn't want her to know what I was doing just yet, but I needed her to play her part without realizing it. So, I stayed calm when I saw her over the next few days. I pretended like things were moving forward with the divorce, like I was just focused on getting the paperwork done. I didn't argue with her, didn't show her how much I still hated her for what she'd done. I needed her to think I was moving on so she wouldn't suspect anything. When I knew Ryan's life was starting to unravel, I planted the final bomb. Emma had kept her phone locked up tight since the confrontation, but I had managed to get my hands on her work phone a few times while she was in the shower. She didn't think I was interested in it, she used it mainly for emails and boring office stuff, but I knew better. I found Ryan's contact info on that phone too, and with a little bit of digging, I found the one thing that would tip this all over the edge: photos. Explicit photos. One she had sent to him and probably hadn't even thought twice about. I downloaded every last one and stored them away. I didn't want them for myself, I wanted them as leverage. I waited until I knew she was meeting Ryan again another Thursday night, and then I acted. While she was getting ready, I casually asked if she was going out for work again. "Yeah, late dinner meeting," she said, not looking me in the eye as she brushed her hair. I nodded, pretending like I didn't care. "That's good. Maybe it'll give you some clarity about how you want to move forward with all this." She glanced at me, a little confused, but she didn't ask questions. She just shrugged and kept getting ready. As soon as she left, I put my plan into action. I sent the explicit photos of Emma to Ryan's work email with a message: "Hope your boss enjoys these." I knew it wouldn't take long for him to panic. If he was stupid enough to keep those photos on a work device or even be associated with them at work, he'd be toast. Within the hour, I had confirmation. One of Ryan's clients, who I had messaged earlier, replied to my anonymous complaint: "Thanks for the heads up. We've had our own concerns. We'll be terminating the contract immediately." I smiled. That was one down. His world was starting to crumble, piece by piece, and I was the one holding the sledgehammer. The real confirmation came the next day. Around noon, I got an email from a different burner account, a colleague of Ryan's who had apparently seen the fallout firsthand. It was short, but sweet: "Looks like your boy Ryan got fired today. Not sure what happened, but he was escorted out of the office." Drama City. I sat back in my chair, feeling the satisfaction roll over me in waves. I had ruined him. He had walked into my life, into my marriage, thinking he could take what wasn't his, and now he was the one losing everything. But I wasn't done yet. Later that evening, I parked outside the hotel again. I didn't need to go in. I just watched as Ryan pulled up in his car, clearly unaware of how much his life had already fallen apart. I watched him get out, walk into the hotel, probably thinking this was just another one of his regular hookups with Emma. But I knew this was the beginning of the end for him. I stayed there for another hour, long enough to know that whatever they were doing inside wouldn't matter soon. Then, I sent the final message. This one went directly to Ryan's wife. I had found her through his social media accounts, she wasn't hard to track down. I sent her the same explicit photos, along with the screenshots of their messages. "I thought you should know what your husband's been up to," I wrote. I drove away from the hotel, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. I knew that by the time Ryan walked out of that building, his entire life would be in ruins, professionally, personally, and financially. The fallout would hit him from every direction, and there was no escaping it. I didn't need to see the end. I already knew how it would play out. Ryan Kendall was finished. I turned off my phone, not caring about the aftermath. As far as I was concerned, the real damage had been done. Let him crawl out from under the rubble if he could. But one thing was certain: he'd never mess with someone else's marriage again. Not after what I did to him. Emma must have known something was coming. After everything that had happened in the last few weeks, the tension between us had become unbearable. She still hadn't put the pieces together about Ryan losing his job or the disaster that was about to hit him at home, but I could tell she felt the distance growing between us. She wasn't asking about the divorce anymore, wasn't making any more tearful apologies. The silence between us had taken on this uneasy edge, like we were both waiting for the final blow to land. That day, I knew it was time. The paperwork was ready. I had officially filed for divorce, and the only thing left was to tell her. Face to face. No running, no hiding behind lawyers or letters. I owed myself that much. I waited for her to come home from work. She still had her routine, despite everything that had happened. She'd come in, pour herself a glass of wine, and act like everything was normal. That was her coping mechanism, I guess, pretend long enough, and maybe it'll go away. But tonight, that wasn't going to work. She walked in, right on schedule, the heels of her shoes clicking on the hardwood as she set her bag down and hung her coat by the door. She barely glanced in my direction as she made her way to the kitchen, pulling a bottle of red from the fridge. It was almost funny, watching her go through the motions like we were still a normal couple, like we hadn't just spent the last few weeks living in a Cold War. "Emma," I said from my spot on the couch. She didn't turn around. "Yeah?" "Sit down. We need to talk." She paused, her hand on the bottle of wine, then turned to face me. For a second, she just stood there, staring at me like she was trying to figure out if this was the moment she'd been dreading. Eventually, she sighed and walked over to the chair across from me, sinking into it without her usual glass. "What is it now?" she asked, her voice tired. I didn't waste time. I filed for divorce. Her eyes flicked up to mine, but she didn't look surprised. She just sat there for a moment, letting the words sink in. Then, she sighed again, rubbing her temples like she had a headache. "I figured that was coming," she said quietly. I nodded. "Yeah. I think we both knew this was where it was headed." She didn't argue. She didn't try to stop me. She just sat there, staring at the floor, her face a mask of exhaustion. For a moment, I thought she might actually break down and cry again, but she didn't. Maybe she didn't have it in her anymore. "How did we get here?" she asked after a long silence, her voice barely above a whisper. I laughed bitterly. "You seriously want to ask that now? After everything?" She looked up at me, her eyes red but dry. "Yeah. I do." I stood up, walking over to the window. I couldn't look at her when I said what I was about to say. "We got here because you decided that I wasn't enough. You went out and found someone else to fill whatever void you thought you had in your life, and you lied to me for months about it." She didn't say anything for a long time. I could feel her eyes on my back, could hear her breathing, but she didn't respond. "I told you," she finally said, her voice soft. "It wasn't like that." "Bullshit," I snapped, turning around to face her. "You cheated. You lied. Don't stand there and try to sugarcoat it now. You knew exactly what you were doing." She flinched at the harshness in my voice but didn't argue. She just stared down at her hands, twisting her fingers together in her lap. "I didn't want to hurt you," she whispered. "Too late for that," I said coldly. She nodded, like she expected that response, and for a few minutes, we just sat there in silence. I could feel the weight of everything pressing down on me: years of marriage, all the good memories mixed in with the betrayal. And now, here we were, sitting in the wreckage of what had once been our life together, trying to figure out what was left. "What do you want me to say?" she asked quietly, looking up at me with those tired eyes. "I can't take it back. I can't undo what I did." I stared at her for a long time, trying to decide if I even wanted her to say anything. What was left to talk about? What was left to fix? The damage had been done, and no amount of talking was going to change that. But I needed closure. I needed to hear her admit it, to acknowledge what she had done, so I could finally put it to rest. "Why him?" I asked, my voice breaking the heavy silence. "Why him? Out of all the people in the world, why did you choose him?" She didn't answer right away. I watched her wrestle with the question, her mouth opening and closing like she was struggling to find the right words. Finally, she shrugged, her voice barely audible. "I don't know. It just happened." That was it. That was her answer. After all the pain she'd caused, after all the lies and betrayal, that was the best she could give me. It just happened. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something, to make her feel the same rage and hurt that was boiling inside me. But I didn't. I couldn't. There was no point anymore. She didn't get it. She never would. I don't think you even understand what you've done, I said, shaking my head in disbelief. You don't get it. You don't realize what you've destroyed. I do, she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. I do, trust me. I stared at her for a moment, searching her face for any sign of remorse, of understanding. But there was nothing there. Just emptiness. Exhaustion. Maybe she was sorry, maybe she wasn't. But it didn't matter anymore. Nothing she could say would change what had happened. I'm staying with Tom for a while, I said, breaking the silence again. Until we can figure out the next steps. I'm not living here anymore. She looked up at me, a flicker of surprise crossing her face, but she didn't argue. She just nodded, like she was too tired to fight. Okay, she said quietly. Okay. I turned and walked toward the door, grabbing my keys off the table. I paused for a second, my hand on the doorknob, trying to figure out if there was anything left to say. But there wasn't. There was no point in dragging this out any longer. This is it, Emma, I said without turning around. I'm done. I opened the door and stepped outside, closing it behind me with a finality that felt like a weight lifting off my shoulders. The cool night air hit me as I stood on the porch, breathing in deeply, trying to steady myself. It was over. The marriage, the lies, the betrayal, it was all behind me now. And for the first time in weeks, I felt a strange sense of calm. I got in my car and drove, not sure where I was going, but knowing that I wasn't coming back. Not to her. Not to the life we'd built together. That part of my life was over, and whatever came next, it would be without her. I parked outside Tom's place and just sat there for a while, staring at the house. He didn't know I was coming over tonight. I hadn't even told him about everything that had happened yet. But he'd understand. He always did. I'd crash on his couch for a few nights, get my head straight, and figure out the next move. I thought about the last 12 years of my life, about the good times and the bad. It was hard to believe it had all led to this. Sitting in my car, alone, in the middle of the night, my marriage in ruins. But there was no going back now. I reached for my phone, scrolling through the contacts until I found my lawyer's number. I tapped out a quick message, filed. It's done. I'm moving out. As I hit send, I felt a strange sense of relief. It wasn't the happy kind, or even the kind that comes from getting revenge. It was the kind that comes from knowing you've finally made a decision, taken a step forward, even if the road ahead is uncertain. There was one more thing I had to do. I tapped through my contacts again, stopping at Emma's name. My thumb hovered over the screen for a moment before I made my decision. I blocked her number. It was time to move on. The first morning at Tom's place felt like the day after a storm. Everything was quieter, but the damage was still there. I'd slept like shit on his lumpy couch, my mind racing in the darkness, thinking about the mess I'd just walked away from. But as I stared up at the ceiling, I realized something. It was over. Really over. There was no more pretending, no more waiting for another shoe to drop. I had finally made the break, and now it was just about dealing with the aftermath. Tom had been my best friend for years, and when I told him what had happened the night before, he didn't say much. He just nodded, handed me a beer, and let me crash in his living room. That's the thing about Tom, he's not the kind of guy who needs to ask a million questions or give you some speech about how you're better off without her. He knew I needed space, and he gave it to me. I sat there in his kitchen, staring at the mess of half-eaten food from the night before, and tried to wrap my head around what came next. The paperwork had been filed. I was officially out of the house. But that didn't mean it was over. There were still the logistics, splitting up the finances, deciding what to do with the house, the inevitable back and forth with lawyers. And then there was Emma. She was still in that house, probably sitting on the same couch we used to share, wondering how the hell her life had gotten to this point. But none of that mattered now. The marriage was done, and there was no fixing it. The only thing left was to figure out how to move forward. Around noon, Tom finally woke up, stumbling into the kitchen and grabbing a cup of coffee. He looked like hell, but that wasn't unusual for him. He worked long hours and barely slept as it was, so the fact that he was up and moving at all was impressive. "You all right?" he asked, leaning against the counter and taking a long sip from his mug. I shrugged. "As good as I can be, I guess." He nodded, not pressing me for more. We stood there in silence for a few minutes, the only sound the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional clink of his mug on the counter. "So, what's the plan?" he finally asked, setting his coffee down and crossing his arms. I rubbed the back of my neck, feeling the tension still knotted there. "I don't know. I guess I need to figure out the next steps with the lawyers, get the financial stuff sorted out. But honestly, I just want to get through this without losing my mind." Tom nodded again, like he understood exactly what I meant. "You'll get through it. Divorce sucks, but it's not the end of the world. Trust me, I've seen enough of them." "Yeah," I muttered, picking at the corner of the table. It's not where I thought I'd be, you know? 12 years, and this is how it ends." "Life's like that, man," Tom said, taking another sip of his coffee. "You think you've got it all figured out, and then, bam, shit hits the fan. But you'll bounce back. You're not the first guy to go through this." I nodded, though I wasn't sure if I really believed it yet. I knew he was right, of course. People go through divorces all the time, and they come out the other side. But when you're in the middle of it, it feels like you're drowning. Like every day is just another wave crashing over you, and you're struggling to keep your head above water. But I had to keep moving. There was no other choice. Over the next few days, I focused on the practical stuff. My lawyer, Linda, was as ruthless as advertised. She didn't waste any time getting things moving with the paperwork. We were aiming for an uncontested divorce, which meant splitting things up as cleanly as possible. Emma and I didn't have kids, so that made it easier, but the house was still an issue. Neither of us wanted to stay in it, but we couldn't exactly just walk away from it either. I hadn't spoken to Emma since the night I left. Part of me wanted to keep it that way. I didn't need to hear any more of her excuses or her sad attempts at justifying what she'd done. But the silence between us was deafening, and I knew we couldn't avoid each other forever. Eventually, we'd have to talk. We'd have to face the reality of what we were doing. It was a Wednesday afternoon when she finally called. I'd been avoiding her texts for days, but when her name popped up on my phone, I knew I couldn't dodge her anymore. I let it ring twice before picking up, my heart pounding in my chest like I was about to walk into a fight. "Yeah?" I answered, keeping my voice flat. There was a pause on the other end, and for a moment, I thought she might hang up. But then I heard her take a shaky breath. "We need to talk." I leaned back against the couch at Tom's place, staring at the ceiling. "About what?" "The house," she said quietly. "The lawyers want us to make a decision. We can't just leave it sitting there." I sighed, rubbing my temples. "Yeah, I know." There was another pause, and I could hear her shifting on the other end of the line, like she was trying to figure out what to say next. "I was thinking, maybe we could sell it? Neither of us wants to live there anymore, and we could split whatever we get for it." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Yeah, that makes sense." Another pause. It was like we didn't know how to talk to each other anymore. Every word felt heavy, like it was carrying the weight of everything that had happened between us. "I'm sorry," she said suddenly, her voice breaking the silence. "I'm sorry for everything." I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar surge of anger bubbling up again. "It's too late for that, Emma." "I know," she whispered. I needed to say it. I needed you to hear it. There wasn't anything left to say. Apologies didn't fix the mess we were in. They didn't undo the lies or the betrayal. They were just words, and I didn't have the energy to care anymore. "Yeah," I said finally. "I heard you." I could feel the conversation hanging there, unfinished, but I didn't want to drag it out any longer. I needed to move on, and so did she. We weren't going to fix this. There was no going back to what we had before. All that was left was the rubble, and we had to figure out how to clean it up. "I'll talk to the realtor," I said, cutting through the silence. "We'll get the house on the market as soon as we can." "Okay," she replied softly. "Thanks." I was about to end the call when she spoke again. "Mark, I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But I hope someday you can forgive me." I let the words hang there for a moment, not sure how to respond. Forgiveness wasn't something I was ready to think about yet. Maybe someday, when the pain wasn't so fresh, I could look back and let go of the anger. But right now? Right now, I didn't have it in me. "We'll see," I said quietly, then hung up before she could say anything else. The next few weeks were a blur of meetings with lawyers, realtors, and endless phone calls. The house went up for sale, and it wasn't long before we had a few offers. Splitting everything down the middle was easy enough, but every time I had to sign another document, it felt like closing the door on another chapter of my life. I wasn't sad about it anymore. I was just tired. Tom kept me busy, dragging me out of the house whenever I started to wallow too much. He took me to the bar a few times, introduced me to some people, and even tried to get me back into dating. I wasn't ready for that yet, though. The idea of starting over with someone else felt exhausting. I needed time to figure out who the hell I was without Emma. Without the marriage. I had spent so long being half of a couple that I wasn't sure how to be just me. One night, a few weeks after the house sold, I found myself sitting on Tom's porch, staring out at the quiet street. The cool night air was refreshing, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a strange sense of peace. It wasn't happiness, exactly. I wasn't there yet. But it was something close to it. I wasn't sure what was next. There was still a lot to figure out: my living situation, my finances, my future. But for the first time, I wasn't overwhelmed by it all. I wasn't drowning anymore. As I sat there, I thought about everything that had happened. The betrayal, the anger, the pain. It had all been so intense, so all-consuming, but now? Now it felt distant, like a bad dream I was finally waking up from. And as I looked out at the quiet street, I realized that I had survived. I had made it through the storm. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure: I was done with the past. Done with Emma, done with the lies, done with the pain. It was time to move forward. And this time, I was doing it on my own terms.